Well, Sam, thanks very much for joining us on the Ideas Lab podcast.
Thank you very much. Such a pleasure to be here.
We met a very long time ago. I can't remember how I first heard about you, but you were doing these remarkable things with Harry, with food. Like I described you as playing with food in my first book, and these remarkable projects around breathable cocktails and designer jellies and so on. And you've turned it into this amazing business. So I want to find out about that. But how did it all begin? What were your first projects?
Well, Harry and I really wanted to do something fun on the weekend. And between our two houses was Borough Market. And we noticed that they didn't have any great sweet food stalls. And we thought, fine, British jellies need to have a comeback. And it was fitting with a couple of trends at the time. So, of course, that was when molecular gastronomy was really sort of sexy and edgy. And, of course, if you're doing a multi-course tasting menu in which you have tomatoes 19 ways on the plate, one of those will probably be a gel. And it fitted in with all that techno food stuff that was happening then. But then also linked with some of the sort of British nostalgia rediscovery of authentic British cooking and British history, really spearheaded by the likes of St. John, who've just been transformational in this era. So we set ourselves up to have a fine English jelly company. And I've got to say, we're 13 years later now, have made an enormous amount of jelly, absolutely scores and scores and scores of it. Have never had a jelly product, but we are now finally getting around to that. So that's one of the
product as in what? It was always a custom thing. It was never a sort of off-the-shelf thing.
Yeah, there's a reason there aren't a lot of jelly companies, because it's a real pain to make and it's a sticky mess to clean up. So we found ourselves doing lots and lots of jellies for weddings, jellies for fashion shows, jellies even for funerals, lots of custom events.
But wait a minute. So, but you weren't trained in food, were you?
No, so neither of us had a food background. We're both enthusiastic about food, but now I've been doing it for 13 years, so you know quite a lot about it now.
Yeah.
But I think in many ways that really helped us at the start, because there was so much expectation to do something really remarkable, but we knew that we're coming from a position where we didn't really know very much. So we'd often bring in different disciplines that we could research and bring them into the realm of food and drink in order to do something new and something that wowed people. So Harry trains as an architect, and our first jellies, he would design on the computer using Rhino, which is the program that was used to design trainers, but then was used by lots of architects to design buildings, and would use it to design jellies. We'd then make all our own molds after 3D printing it. And that's really the first time that people had seen CAD design and 3D printing used in the arena of food and drink. There are now a number of people doing that. And it's much more, it's quite accessible actually. But we then took that ethos into other arenas as well. So whether it's working with pyrotechnicians, magicians, animal handlers, lots of engineers, all these different disciplines, bringing them into the world of food and drink, with the view ultimately just to giving people an interesting afternoon out.
And can you tell us some of the more out there things that you've done? I mentioned the breathable cocktails. You did that a few times, didn't you?
Yes, that's alcoholic architecture. There's if we were a meter apart, we wouldn't be able to see each other because there'd be so much booze in the air, and that would be intoxicating through the lungs and the eyeballs with every breath you take. We've flooded the roof of Selfridges, working 3 different engineering firms to make sure it didn't collapse, to make a boating lake and float up bar. We've made the world's lightest meringues using aerogel. It's a supercritical drying. It's a technique that's used by NASA to collect comet dust and analyze it. And we've cooked with lava as well. So it's 1,350 degrees Celsius. It's very hot.
Yeah, I think I watched a video of that where you cooked a steak or something.
Yeah, that was a delicious steak.
So, well done, probably.
No, you can.
No,
You just have to cook it. You just have to cook it very, very quickly.
Okay, right. And I mean, what's interesting is that I have a lot of followers, a lot of clients who have all sorts of really innovative ideas, wacky ideas, you might even say, as you have done, but you actually did them. So, I mean, what's interesting, and you've turned it into a business, quite a sizable business now. But what do you think has been the key to you following through on these things and turning it into a business rather than it just being like, oh, I'll do that one day? Have you always been somebody who's follows through on their ideas?
Well, God, there's a whole nest of our answers in there. I think to start with, we did things and we almost didn't. Well, very naive. We didn't realize how difficult they would be. And it's only when you've promised everyone that you're going to deliver this thing that you realize what a challenge it's going to be. And then I think having a short-term memory helped as well, because you do it again and again and again. And eventually you realize that through learning a very hard way, you know quite a lot about doing things that are impossible. So most of our briefs are do something that's never been done before. Oh, and you've got 2 days to come up with it. And it needs to be on the front page of newspapers around the world. And now if we're not operating with that sort of challenge, then it just doesn't it's not as quite as piquant. It's not quite as spicy as we'd want it. But I think when we started off, part of the rigors of the business really helped us because we didn't have any clients. There was no one that was waiting to commission us. So a lot of our very first projects, they would by necessity have to have some sort of business model to them. And we weren't setting out to make money, but we knew that it'd be a pretty short-lived enterprise if we lost money all the time.
Yeah.
So that meant that we've always been pretty good at realizing things cost effectively, and also realizing quite ambitious projects quite cost effectively, and then making sure that while the project might be quite niche, some of those that we've outlined, there's enough people who are similarly enthusiastic about it who want to come along and pay some money for it. And every so often you get a subject that people are really enthusiastic about, like ice cream.
Oh, right.
We made for our endeavour, the British Museum of Food, an ice cream museum, which was rather wonderful.
Oh, brilliant. Yes. Do you know the Oppo brothers?
No, who are they?
Oh, they're right. They make the world's first healthy ice cream, and I featured them in the book as well.
Oh, wow.
Is that
Haley Top?
Charlie and Harry, I think.
I mean, there was nothing healthy about our ice cream. We were going full fat, full sugar. Yeah. And it was flavour held the key, and sometimes it's okay.
Oh, there's room for that. I'm a fan of the odd unhealthy thing. So, I mean, you do seem to have got quite a knack for attracting PR. You've been in so many different newspapers and magazines. What's the secret to that? Is it just doing something that's new, that's fresh? What is it that seems to get people's attention?
Well, I think you need to hit a number of different sweet spots all at once. So first and foremost, it's topical. There's always something that the media is concerned about, and it's kind of like a bell curve, isn't it? You just want to stay just on the front end of that, so it feels really fresh, but it's the thing that people are curious about next. If it's too far outside the bounds of people's comprehension, then it doesn't really hit. And we did a project many years ago, which was using EEG to chart people's brainwaves as you ate ice cream again. And at this point, we had Paul Polman, the CEO of Unilever, having his brain scanned as he ate an ice cream. It was really remarkable, and no one was really into that. And I think it was just so out. This is about in 2012 or so. It's just so far out of the bounds of what people were looking at with experience at the time, it didn't really register. We actually had to write all the code for it, working with neuroscientists at UCL. It's a really, really interesting project, but it didn't hit. Whereas 4 or 5 years later, we did something that's much more very, very much similar in terms of output, except this time we're using a £30 piece of kit off the shelf. Code was pre-programmed. You ate an ice cream. There's some lasers fired out to see what was going on in your brain as you did it. And it just got huge, huge, huge traction because of the timeliness of it. It was much more within people's frame of references at the time. And there were lasers and ice cream involved in the song, which helped.
That's a really good point, I think, yeah. And you're trying to, it's not just about something being remarkable, it's remarkable just as people are starting to get interested in that kind of topic.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think storytelling's key. So when we're working on something, we start off by writing it out long form. And, it's got to be understandable as a single sentence, but also over the course of 2,000 words. And if you can hit both of those, then it's probably interesting. And our way to judge that is just that same time you go and meet your friends for a coffee, you see them in the pub, you start telling them about it. If they switch off halfway through, it's probably not going to work. If they ask you to tell them more, then that's a winner. And then the final bit is making that work in terms of imagery. And gosh, I really hanker for when we started, when you'd be able to have one hero shot, that was it. And now you do a day of media to prep for one of these, and you've got to capture like 120 stills in a day. You've got to get video content. It's got to be formatted so that it works native media across all these different platforms. Used to be a lot simpler.
Yeah.
But I mean, now as much as anything else, the way we do it is we used to have our press list of important journalists. Now we just treat everyone as a journalist effectively.
Yeah. It's I think it's amazing the stuff you've done. I think one of the things you were doing recently was the world's first vegan hotel suite. Was that one of yours?
Yeah. So that was with the Hilton in Bankside, and we reformatted the whole hotel suite so that everything was vegan. It's actually quite a challenge. We're using some quite innovative materials as well. And funny enough, we're able to triangulate. So I'm a big fan of the pineapple, especially pineapples in architecture. It's a symbol of welcome. And we discovered this material called Pinatex, which is made out of pineapple husks. And the site at the hotel suite was very, very close to the site of the first pineapple grown in Britain by John Tradescant, who is Charles II's gardener. There's this wonderful painting of Tradescant offering Charles this hallowed pineapple.
Wow.
But yeah, again, that was just at the right time. So that was at the start of 2019. And at the 2019, it was it launched in January, just as everyone made their New Year's resolutions. And that was probably the year in which the highest proportion of people ever decided to go vegan. And this is when we launched it. As a consequence, their occupancy rates have just been really, really, really high. So it's worked for them from a business point of view, not just with all the press halo, but actually getting a payoff in the end because they're doing something that is exciting for people.
Yeah, no, that's great. And presumably, with things like this, when large corporations like Hilton hire you, I'd imagine that pays fairly well compared to some small-scale public events.
Well, it depends how much time you're spending on it.
Right.
And I think all of our design team got so enthusiastic about something like that they just wouldn't ever stop designing because they wanted to make it absolutely perfect. but yeah, we try to get ever better at. And the challenge that we have is so many of the projects we have are so interesting. They're almost like your dream project. And at some point, you just have to put your pen down and go have a balanced life. Otherwise, you're not, as a creative, you're not going to be able to come up with anything else new if you're spending all your time working on it. You've got to have different modes of thinking.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we try and get better at managing the amount of time we're pumping into these projects to make them spot on.
Yeah. Typical creatives. Yeah, they're so much fun. You just kind of keep working on it. And you've written something like 8 books or something. Is that right?
Well, I think as I said, we've written probably 5 or 6 proper books, and then the other sort of things that are so weird, wonderful, and novel. No one else would publish them, so we've published them ourselves. But it's things like.
So, what is a book that's so weird that a normal publisher wouldn't publish it?
Okay. So one of them was a book called Memoirs of a Stomach, which is a really niche diet book written in the mid-19th century. So I think it's 1852, entirely from the perspective of a restless, disturbed and angry stomach that was telling its owner what it shouldn't be putting down as in recommending your diets. And then we re-illustrated that. That was just when pill cams had been invented. So rather than having an endoscope going up your nose and down your throat, you'd swallow a tiny, tiny camera with a battery and some lights. And as it swam, like a fantastic voyage along your digestive tract, it would record all of that. And then that would be used as a diagnostic equipment so that doctors could see, is anything wrong with you. And then we used that new tech and we recorded the digestive tract of the food writer and chef Gizzy Erskine. And we thought, if we're doing this, let's do it live. So we recorded it in front of a live audience of 300 people with the chief, one of the best regarded gastroenterologists at Guy's Hospital, the people that invented the kit, and also the technician in the UK who's looked at more pill cam footage than anyone else in the UK. And they were like our guides to a fly through of a very game Gizzy Erskine. And that was then used to illustrate the book. Sorry.
Wow.
As you can appreciate.
And somehow
not a huge amount of demand for it.
Yeah, a publisher did not want to make that a major focus.
They passed up on that. They also passed up on. So we published it ourselves, and now I don't even have a copy. So, it was popular enough that it's totally sold out. I think my sister and my brother has one. So I'll look at theirs if I need to refer to it.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. And what are you doing at the moment? You're doing something of a design museum, aren't you? It's one of your projects.
Yes, we've got an exhibition that's up at the Design Museum at the moment, and that's called the Fountain of Hygiene, and it is about hand sanitizer. And that starts off as just before we went into lockdown, realised that like everyone else, there's going to be a very significant change to the way we live as a society, and pretty much everything we do, which is about food and drink, it's about conviviality, it's about people come together, it's about culture, and those are things that for me, happen most effectively when people are out in the public realm. So we're looking at can we create a forum that creates a space for innovation around hand sanitizer to get people back out in the public realm and feeling safe about it and doing so in a manner that's safe. So we had an open call for hand sanitizer designs. And they're all sorts of wonderful designs. So, everything from doorbells that you press and that spritzes you to designs encouraged to get kids enthusiastic about washing their hands. So some that's like brushes that you brush on the kids' hands. Others like it's an alpaca that spits out hand sanitizer at you or your child's hands. But it's now an exhibition that's up at the Design Museum. We've also got a wonderful sculpture by Candida Powell Williams, which is a tongue fountain. And then the whole thing's being packed up and will tour internationally and happily as well. not only was the show raising money for the British Red Cross, but also we've been using it as a forum to introduce manufacturers to the often quite young designers to get their products made, and a number of the products are going into production now.
Wow, that's great. I hope the alpaca is one of them.
Yeah, I think it's great. It's really, really good.
And I suppose I'm interested now that you've got quite a sizable company. How many staff have you got?
16 at the moment.
Wow. And you started off just you and Harry playing around with these experiments. So is there anything you wish you'd known? Like if you had one piece of advice for you and Harry back at the beginning that you know now, you didn't know then, what do you think it would be?
I mean, like now, obviously, you spend a lot more time looking at the business side of things, writing proper budgets for things rather than just charging ahead. But also, I think if we're doing that, you would have lost some of the exuberance and enthusiasm, and which I think I look back at some of these pitches I was doing, aged 24, to rooms full of senior executives from some of the world's biggest companies. The Diageos, the Coca-Colas, the Unilever, and if I'd gone into those meetings fully aware of the risk, health and safety, the event management, the business implications of the creatives that we're coming up with, they just would have seemed absolutely wild. But you're able to go in completely confident. Actually the events that we delivered as a result, through a lot of hard work, were really good. So maybe not knowing can be a secret weapon too.
I think it is. I always use that example of Grand Designs, and they interview the person at the end of the project. And at the beginning, they go, it's going to take 12 months and cost 50,000 or 500,000, whatever it is. And then at the end, it's taken 2 or 3 years, and it's nearly destroyed their marriage, and it's cost, twice as much money as they thought, and it's nearly bankrupted them. And they said, how do you feel now? And he goes, well, if we'd known what it was going to take, we wouldn't have ever started. But now look at this amazing place, and we get to have this as our home. And I think in all entrepreneurship, because it is kind of almost like entrepreneurship, building your own house, it is a bit like that. It's like, if I'd known it's going to be this much hard work, I wouldn't have done it. But I'm so glad that I'm here, and I've learned so much along the way. So it sounds a little bit similar for you, really. Yeah,
of course, and we're working in a creative industry as well, and friction's really important. Friction between different ideas and then resolving them swiftly and constructively to find a route ahead. But unless you have that, the work's just not very interesting. It's almost like there's a if I'm working on a project and there aren't some imminent problems, that's when I'm most worried, because it just feels like someone's not telling you something, because there's always a challenge, and that's part of the joy of it. We installed at the Design Museum. That was really, really exciting because we just come out of lockdown. That was the first. Normally have several projects going live every single week. It had a few months of not taking projects live. Installed at the Design Museum. It's like, oh great, we've got a show up. People can come along. Bang, show's on the road. The next day, got a call from them saying, your fountain's leaking. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, oh yeah, this is what it is. It's that buzz, it's that energy. It's like, I was like, okay, all is right with the world again. There's a leaking fountain. Fine, we can go and sort it out. Fixed it immediately, and it's been fine ever since. But it's there's that sort of like working tension that I think you need to learn to revel in.
Well, nothing's an adventure if you know what the outcome is, really. And also, it also provides a bit of kind of barrier to entry for other people, because, like I say, some of those people have all sorts of ideas. They're not willing to go through the pain barrier of actually realizing them, which which you two clearly are.
Yeah, maybe have a high threshold for pain. Well, I think we're able to share the pain between us, which I think actually genuinely really helps. And when people speak to me about starting up their own business, looking back, the greatest thing has been doing it with Harry, who's very, very different to me, but someone who I've got just a terrific amount of respect for. And it means that when it gets too much for either one of us, the other one can normally see the way through, just because we've got such different tools that we sort of bring to get better on any problem. And that makes it rather fun.
Yeah. Now I think you said, I quoted you in the book as saying something about it, but now is the best time ever to be putting your ideas into the world. Is that right?
Now specifically.
Well, as in, today it's easier than it ever was, I think was the point.
Oh, yeah. Okay, sorry, I get where that's going.
Not right now with coronavirus, clearly.
Well, yeah, but again, so the success of Bompas Harry only really came out of the back of the 2008 recession. So 2008, suddenly there's a lot of retail units available. There are now.
Yeah.
And it meant that we as some kids with some ideas were able to get access to sites for a couple of weeks to experiment, to learn. It was great for the sites. So we talked about the Breathable Clouded Gin and Tonic. When that opened in 2009 in Carnaby Street, the pub next to it, which was a pub of one of the big pub chains, was the best performing pub above target in Britain for the 2 weeks that we were open. So clearly, it was really, really good for that localized area. It's driving traffic into it that wasn't normally there, and not all of the opportunities will necessarily be apparent, but there are a lot of opportunities. That are coming out of coronavirus. We're trying to make sure that we make the most of them.
Yeah, I remember going to that event in Carnaby Street, being in that thick fog of gin and tonic, and slowly feeling yourself getting inebriated. It was good fun. You give everyone plastic overalls to wear so it doesn't soak
PPE,
into your clothes.
actually.
Yeah, PPE. You were way ahead of your time then.
Very, very early on, we discovered that PPE could be fun.
Yeah,
I think that's one that we're going to have a new view on now.
Yeah.
But, Anyway.
Yeah. So just one question before we finish: is that an organ behind you?
Yes, this is a whiskey organ. I'm tilting my screen now so you can see it's full 6 meters high. It's gold and white. It matches our golden ceiling in the room that I'm in. This is we do a lot of work helping brands rediscover the joy of their food product primarily. So we do a lot of work in the food and drink space. And this is for the team at Johnny Walker. And Johnny Walker's is a blended whiskey. So how do you explain how a blended whiskey might be better than a single malt? And music's really good because music's an analogy that lots of people understand. And you can say, well, look, in a single malt might just be one instrument, but a blended whiskey might be a whole orchestra playing together. But a way to articulate a whole orchestra is an organ, because it has all the different voices of the trumpets, the cornets, the nasals, the piccolos, on all the different stops. And so it lets you move what's a taste experience into the realm of primarily sound, but then also the visual impact of an organ. And this then toured around the world doing tastings in 14 different countries.
Wow. Fantastic. So yes, that's I like the idea of that. It sounds very tasty as well, a whiskey organ.
It used a lot of science. This is with Professor Charles Spence at the Cross Modal Research Lab at Oxford University. And your palate is very, very much sort of held hostage by, or at least ambushed by your sense of sight and sound. So as the organ plays, it directs your palate around a glass of Johnny Walker Blue Label.
Right.
And with each of 6 movements, it will change your palate by about as much as 20%. So because something like a whiskey is like a matrix of many, many different flavors, and it can dial up and dial down those different flavors that you can have within a single glass. So it's quite interesting.
I love it. Okay. And just to finish, do you have one last tip for people at the beginning of their entrepreneurial journey or their creative journey?
I think the best thing is not to overthink it. Whenever we overthink projects, they never happen. And I think it's because you get bored of them. so the way that we approach things now is just to blitz them out super, super, super quick. And then kind of work out how it's going as you go along. We use this sort of analogy of like always trying to fix the plane as one of the engines is burning mid-flight, and then being comfortable with that as well. And then that's a good operational.
Like building your car as you're driving it, kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great. Well, I really appreciate your time and look forward to seeing everything else you are doing. If people want to find out about Bompas and Parr, where should they go?
Just our website, bombasparr.com, or our social, which is @Bompas and Parr. And hopefully, and the main thing is that you can come along to something safely with all our hand sanitizer innovations. Yeah,
that's great. Well, thanks very much.
John, thank you so much. As always, it's very, very inspiring speaking to you, and I hope we get to do some more soon.